apostles gathered around Jesus and told him all they had done and taught. He said to them, "Come away to a deserted place all by yourselves and rest for a while." For many were coming and going, and they had no leisure even to eat. And they went away in the boat to a deserted place by themselves. Now many saw them going and recognized them, and they hurried there on foot from all the towns and arrived ahead of them. As Jesus went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion for them, because they were like sheep without a shepherd. And he began to teach them many things. When it grew late, his disciples came to him and said, "This is a deserted place, and the hour is now very late. Send them away so that they might go into the surrounding villages and country and buy something for themselves to eat." But Jesus answered them, "You give them something to eat." They said to Jesus, "Are we to go and buy 200 denarii worth of bread and give it to them to eat?" And Jesus said to them, "How many loaves have you? Go and see." When they found out, they said, 5 and 2 fish. And then Jesus ordered the disciples to get all the people to sit down in groups on the green grass. So they sat down in groups of hundreds and 50s. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to the heaven and blessed and broke the loaves and gave them to his disciples to set before the people. And he divided the 2 fish among them all, and all ate and were filled. And they took up 12 baskets full of broken pieces and of the fish. And those who had eaten the loaves numbered 5,000 men. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. It might seem strange to go back into the story as we gather on this night. But this is the night where Jesus gathered in the upper room with his disciples for the last time and breaks bread before the events of the next 24 hours. So it makes sense to go back to this feeding story because in some ways it helps us understand what the disciples need to be listening for then and even now. But in order to understand this feeding story, we have to go back just a little bit. Because it begins with the disciples coming to Jesus and saying, and listening and sharing all the things that they had done and taught. And so what we do is we have to go back to when they were sent away. And what they were sent away was for some very peculiar instructions. These were the instructions. Take nothing for the journey as you go out. No, except a staff. No bread, no bag, no money, but wear sandals and wear one garment. And basically then Jesus says, now you're going out, and wherever you go, when people offer you hospitality, accept it. Stay there and teach and heal. And if they don't welcome you, then just shake the dust off of your feet as you go away. In other words, they're going out to teach, but they're also going out learning how to rely on the hospitality of others. So they come back, and I think they're amazed. And they're excited, but they're also worn out. And Jesus then takes them to a deserted place, which we need to be listening carefully for. But this deserted place should remind us of a story from long ago. It's the story when the people of Israel, who are celebrating on this night, Passover, they went out into the wilderness and they did not have food. And it required God saying, oh, you see that white, strange, flaky substance on the ground? You can eat that. And by the way, those birds that are flying by, those are called quail. You can eat those too. God had to open their eyes in a deserted place that there was more sustenance available than they could have even imagined, when all they could see was sand and dirt and possibly death. And as they hungered to be back in the slavery of Egypt, God says, no, there's sustenance around you. And so just as the disciples have come back from learning their own lesson about finding hospitality in the deserted and unknown places, it's clear that they haven't fully embraced that message. Because what they say is, Jesus, it's time to send them away. It's late. It's a desert place. Send them to the town so that they can go and fend for themselves, and they can go and buy food for themselves. Because the disciples knew they couldn't feed. They didn't have enough. They didn't have enough amongst them to feed all of these people. And Jesus says, you give them something to eat. Because he realizes they are trapped by the economic system. Despite having learned what hospitality is and how, because by the way, we're going to find out in a minute that they came back with way more than they left, right? Jesus says, you feed them with what you have. And without flinching, they come back with the 5 loaves and fish. Now, this is why this is important. Because they left with nothing. They went out with nothing, and they come back with something. And here in the midst, they're saying, well, there isn't any way for this to happen here. And so, like manna and like quail, God has to show them in this place as well. When I had the opportunity to go to Israel about 5 years ago, 6 years ago now, we had a tour guide whose family, as she said, our family's been in Magdala way longer than Mary ever was. They had been there for generations. Her family can trace their roots back to the original followers of Jesus. They know that their families had been there. And she said the thing about this story that most folks don't get is that no one would have gone into a deserted place or into the wilderness without some food in their tunic. They would have had something underneath their jacket so that they, and maybe just the circle of people around them who would come with them, that they were going to take care of their own. No one would have gone out into the wilderness. It's why the disciples had bread and fish. And so what Jesus is doing is he sets down the disciples and says, put them in groups of 50s and 100s. We're going to show something. And then he has the disciples model. And they don't know that that's what they're doing, right? Jesus says, just follow me here. We'll figure this out. And he sits them down and invites them to start sharing. And you can imagine in the crowd, all of a sudden they see, oh, instead of disappearing, going our own ways, or just taking care of ourselves, we're going to share with one another. One person might have had some figs. Another person might have had some broken fish, and some pieces of fish, some bread. And the next thing you know, this 5,000, we know there's more than 5,000 because they only counted the men in the story. So you can imagine that there was more food than 5,000 for all of these folks. And it happened, and the miracle isn't that Jesus somehow miraculously took these tiny things and fed people with them. But the miracle was that people finally were able to imagine another world was possible. They were finally able to imagine that they didn't have to just take care of themselves, that if they figured out a way to share, that they had more than they would have ever imagined, that there was abundance all around them, that there is always around us manna and quails. And that's what this night is about. The truth is, when we stop being stingy, when we stop thinking there just isn't enough to go around, when our imaginations are finally unleashed to believe that another way is possible, we might just find out that there's all sorts of sustenance around us. And this is where the connection for me, I think, comes at the table. Because at the table, when they gathered, Judas was there. And I think Judas gets a bad rap. I think he was trying to force Jesus' hand. Like most good followers of Jesus, we're always trying to force Jesus' hand or attach Jesus to our favorite project or political campaign. But the truth is, Jesus will not be useful. He teaches us how to share and to love, but Jesus can't be used in this way. And so Judas tries to force Jesus' hand, and it goes very badly. And the truth is, every time we try to force God's hand to do the things we want to do, the truth is we will find ourselves hanging over a potter's field. Judas, like us, could not imagine that another way was possible. So he had to make it happen. The truth of the matter is, we all live in desert places. If you're following the news at all, you know how difficult things have been in our city. If we look around in our own congregations, we always talk about what is not there, what we don't have, who used to be around, and how we used to be full to capacity. We have to let go of trying to force God's hand because new things and new life can happen in the most deserted places. In the places of death. In the shadow of the cross. Because the truth is that when we finally come to a place where all of our management and all of our vision statements and all of our best laid plans come crashing down, it is there that we can finally be open to the possibility that new life is possible, just not in the way we expect it. If we can just give up that bread that we've got tucked under our own cloak for our own folk and begin to open our hands. So it's my hope that on this night, that as Jesus invites us to this table, that we might see that another way is possible, that death is not the last word. And that is what this is all